They buried her at dawn. The earth was still wet from the night's rain, and the sky hung low and grey, as if the heavens themselves were mourning. The villagers stood in silence, their faces hard as stone, watching as the gravediggers lowered the simple wooden coffin into the ground. Her mother wept. Not loudly, no, in this village, grief was expected to be quiet, dignified, almost invisible. But her shoulders shook, and her hands trembled as she clutched a faded cloth to her chest, the same cloth she'd wrapped her daughter in when she was born 23 years ago. They filled the grave quickly. Too quickly. As if they wanted to forget. As if burying her deep enough would erase the questions, the fear, the strangeness that had begun to cling to her name like smoke. But by nightfall, she was standing at her mother's window. Alive. Breathing. Her eyes wide with confusion and terror. No one could explain it. And before this story ends, she would die 6 more times. 7 deaths in total. And 7 times, she would return. If you believe in mysteries that defy explanation, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel now. Because what you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about life, death, and justice. Her name was Amara. In the language of her people, it means grace. And for most of her life, that's exactly what she embodied. Grace in the way she moved through the village, always the first to help a neighbor carry water, the first to offer food when someone went hungry, the first to smile even when her own burdens were heavy. She lived in a small village nestled between 2 hills, where the red earth stretched for miles and the baobab tree stood like ancient sentinels guarding secrets older than memory. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where your reputation was built brick by brick from childhood, and where a single rumor could destroy you faster than fire. Amara lived with her mother in a modest mud brick house at the edge of the village. Her father had died when she was 12, a farming accident, they said, though some whispered it was something darker. Her younger brother, Kofi, was only 8 then, and from that day forward, Amara became more than a sister. She became his protector, his second mother, his entire world. She worked as a seamstress, her hands quick and skillful, stitching together bright fabrics into dresses and robes that the wealthier families would wear to weddings and festivals. She didn't earn much, but it was enough. Enough to keep Kofi in school. Enough to put food on the table. Enough to survive. But survival in that village came with a price. Because Amara was different. Not in the way she looked, though she was beautiful, with deep brown eyes that seemed to see straight into your soul, but in the way misfortune seemed to follow her like a shadow she couldn't shake. Small things at first. A chicken would die the day after she walked past someone's yard. A child would fall ill hours after she'd held them. A crop would wither just days after she'd helped harvest it. Coincidences, her mother would say. Just bad luck. But in a village where superstition runs deeper than blood, coincidence is never just coincidence. Whispers began. She carries something dark. Her father's death cursed the family. Stay away from her if you value your peace. And Amara felt it. Every cold stare. Every conversation that stopped when she entered a room. Every mother who pulled her child away when she walked by. But she endured. Because that's what grace does. It endures. Until the day she died for the first time. It started with a fever. Nothing unusual in a place where medical care was a 2-hour walk away and most families relied on herbal remedies and prayer. Amara had been feeling weak for days, but she pushed through, as she always did. There was work to finish, fabric to deliver, coffee to feed. But one morning, she didn't wake up. Her mother found her lying still, her skin cold, her lips pale, her chest unmoving. No pulse. No breath. Nothing. The village healer was summoned. An old woman named Amara, whose knowledge of herbs and rituals was respected, even feared. She examined Amara's body, pressed her ear to her chest, held a feather to her lips. Nothing. She is gone, Amara said quietly. Her mother collapsed. Kofi screamed. Neighbors gathered, some out of genuine sorrow, others out of morbid curiosity. They prepared her body according to tradition. Washed her. Wrapped her in white cloth. Laid her in a simple coffin built by the village carpenter. And at dawn, they buried her. The ceremony was brief. A few words spoken by the village elder. A handful of soil tossed onto the coffin. And then silence as the grave was filled. Her mother refused to leave. She sat by the grave long after everyone else had gone, her hands pressed into the red earth, whispering prayers and apologies and promises she could never keep. By the time the sun set, the village had already begun to move on. Death was common here. Life was short. You mourned quickly and returned to your work because there was always work to be done. But that night, as the moon rose full and bright over the hills, Amara's mother heard a sound. A soft tapping at her window. She lifted her head, her eyes swollen from crying, and there, standing just outside, bathed in moonlight, was her daughter. Alive. If you've ever lost someone you love, if you've ever wished for one more moment, one more chance to see them again, hit the like button. Because this is only the beginning. Her mother didn't scream. She didn't faint. She simply stared, her mouth open, her breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her throat. "Mama," Amara whispered, her voice hoarse, confused. "Why am I outside? What happened?" Her mother stumbled to the door, threw it open, and pulled her daughter inside with trembling hands, as if afraid she might disappear again if she let go. You died," her mother breathed, her voice breaking. "We buried you. I saw you. You were gone." Amara looked down at herself. Her hands were clean, but there was dirt under her nails. Her white burial cloth was torn and stained with red earth. Her feet were bare, cut and bleeding from walking through the rocky paths. "I don't remember," she said, her voice small, frightened. "I remember being sick. And then, darkness. And then I woke up in the ground. I could hear voices above me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I clawed my way up. It took hours. And when I finally broke through, everyone was gone." Her mother held her so tightly it hurt. Kofi, woken by the commotion, ran into the room and froze when he saw his sister. For a moment, he looked like he might run. But then Amara smiled, that same gentle smile she'd always given him, and he threw himself into her arms, sobbing. But the relief was short-lived. Because by morning, the entire village knew. And what should have been a miracle became a curse. She is not natural. The dead do not return unless something dark pulls them back. She is a spirit pretending to be Amara. She will bring misfortune to us all. The fear spread faster than fire. Families locked their doors when she walked by. Children were forbidden from speaking to her. Even the village elder, a man who had known her since birth, would not meet her eyes. The healer, Amara, came to examine her. She checked her pulse, her breath, her eyes. Everything was normal. But Amara shook her head slowly, her expression grim. "I have seen many things in my years," she said quietly, "but I have never seen someone return from the grave. There are forces at work here beyond my understanding. You should leave this village, child. Before the fear turns to violence." But where could she go? This was her home. Her mother, her brother, they were here. She had no money, no connections in the cities, no way to survive beyond these hills. So she stayed. And tried to live as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Comment stay strong if you've ever felt rejected by the people who were supposed to love you. 3 months passed. Amara kept to herself. She walked in silence. She avoided the village square, the well, the market. She became a ghost in her own home, moving through life like someone who no longer believed she had a right to exist. But then it happened again. She was walking to deliver a finished dress when a rope she was carrying snagged on a tree branch. She tugged it free, but the branch snapped, and a heavy limb came crashing down, striking her head with a sickening crack. She fell to the ground, blood pooling beneath her. A farmer found her an hour later. He checked for a pulse. Nothing. Once again, they prepared her body. Once again, they buried her. And once again, by nightfall, she stood at her mother's window. This time, her mother didn't cry. She simply opened the door and let her in. How many times, Amara, her mother whispered. How many times will this happen? Amara didn't have an answer. But the village did. She is cursed. She is possessed. She is an abomination. And the hostility grew sharper, colder, more dangerous. The third death came from poison. It was at a wedding feast. Amara had been invited, reluctantly, because the bride's family owed her a debt. She sat at the edge of the gathering, quiet and invisible, eating the food placed before her. Within an hour, she was convulsing on the ground. The healer was called, but it was too late. Her heart stopped. Her breathing ceased. For the third time, they buried her. And for the third time, she returned. This time, the village didn't just whisper. They shouted. Burn her. Drive her out. She will bring death to us all. Her mother begged them for mercy. Kofi stood in front of his sister, tears streaming down his face, refusing to let anyone touch her. And Amara, standing there covered in dirt, her eyes hollow with exhaustion, finally spoke. I don't know why this is happening to me, she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. But I am not your enemy. I am not a curse. I am just trying to survive. But survival, she was learning, was a privilege not everyone was allowed. If you believe everyone deserves a chance to live, hit the like button and share this story. The fourth, fifth, and sixth deaths came quickly, one after the other, as if the universe itself was testing her. A fall from a cliff she didn't remember climbing. A snake bite while fetching water. An illness so sudden and violent that she was dead before the sun set. Each time, they buried her. Each time, she returned. And each time, the fear deepened. The village began to unravel. Crops failed. Livestock died. A child drowned in the river. And every tragedy, every misfortune, was blamed on her. She is the reason the rains have not come. She is the reason my son is sick. She is the reason we are cursed. Amara stopped trying to defend herself. What was the point? They had already decided who she was. But something inside her had begun to shift. She was no longer just surviving. She was searching. Because if she kept dying, if she kept returning, there had to be a reason. There had to be something, or someone, behind it. And she was determined to find out what. Her investigation began quietly. She started noticing patterns. The timing of her deaths. The people who were present. The strange, almost deliberate nature of each incident. And then she found it. A small leather pouch hidden beneath the floorboards of her home. Inside, dried herbs, bone fragments, and a piece of cloth stitched with symbols she didn't recognize. A cursed object. Someone had placed it there. Someone wanted her dead. But who? She thought back to every death, every moment leading up to it. And slowly, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place, she began to see the truth. The poisoned food had been prepared by the bride's aunt, a woman whose son had once asked to marry Amara, only to be rejected. The rope that broke had been frayed deliberately by a man whose wife had accused Amara of stealing her husband's affections. The snake that bit her had been placed in her path by a healer's apprentice jealous of Amara's beauty. It wasn't a curse from the gods. It was a curse from the living. People she had known her entire life. People who smiled to her face and plotted her death behind her back. If this makes your heart ache, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, comment truth below. The seventh death was different. Because this time, Amara was ready. She gathered the evidence. The pouch. The testimonies of those who had seen suspicious behavior. The pattern of jealousy and malice that had poisoned her village long before it poisoned her. And she decided to confront them. She walked to the village square during the monthly council meeting, when all the elders and families were gathered. She stood in the center, covered in the dirt of her most recent grave, holding the curse pouch high above her head. You call me a ghost, she said, her voice ringing out clear and strong. You call me cursed. But the real curse is the hatred you carry in your hearts. The lies you tell yourselves to justify your cruelty. She pointed to the bride's aunt. You poisoned me because your son's pride was hurt. She pointed to the man with the frayed rope. You tried to kill me because your wife's jealousy poisoned your mind. She pointed to the healer's apprentice. You cursed me because you envied what you could never have. The silence that followed was deafening. And then, from the back of the crowd, a voice spoke. It was her mother. If you do not face the truth of what you have done, her mother said, her voice trembling but fierce, then you are no better than the evil you claim to fear. One by one, people began to lower their eyes. Shame, thick and heavy, settled over the square. And Amara, standing there in the light of the setting sun, looked at them not with anger, but with sorrow. I do not want your punishment, she said quietly. I want your honesty. I want you to look at yourselves and see what you have become. The village did not change overnight. But slowly, cracks began to form in the foundation of fear and superstition that had ruled them for so long. The elders issued a formal apology. The families responsible for the attempt on her life offered restitution. The healer performed a cleansing ritual, not to remove a curse from Amara, but to symbolize the village's commitment to change. And Amara, for the first time in months, felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Peace. She didn't forget what they'd done. She didn't pretend the wounds weren't there. But she chose to move forward, not for them, but for herself. Because that's what grace does. It doesn't erase the past. It transforms it. Years later, when travelers came to the village and asked about the woman who died 7 times, the villagers would tell the story differently. Not as a ghost story. Not as a cautionary tale about curses and superstition. But as a story about courage. About a woman who faced death itself and came back, not with vengeance, but with truth. And on quiet nights, when the moon is full and the baobab trees whisper in the wind, you can still see Amara walking through the village, her head held high, her spirit unbroken. Because she learned something that most people never do. That you can die 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways, to betrayal, to cruelty, to fear, and still choose to live. So I ask you now, what would you have done if you were in her shoes? Would you have stayed and fought for the truth? Or would you have left and never looked back? Comment your answer below. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications for more powerful stories that will move you, challenge you, and remind you what it means to be human. And if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, the greatest act of rebellion is simply refusing to die. Thank you for watching. Until next time, remember, your story isn't over until you decide it is.